Hi Jen.
Hello.
How's it going?
Doing okay. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Excited to get started here with our um, live stream for you and your family and your daughter, and it's going to be great. I am just going to go ahead and fix up the YouTube metadata and everything like that. While I'm doing that, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself? And
Sure.
talk a little bit about what we're doing here today.
Yeah. So I am Jennifer Harris Dault. I live in upstate New York. Um, I'm the queer parent of a trans child. And in the midst of everything that is going on here in the United States, we are looking at leaving the country. And by looking at, I mean we are planning very strongly to leave the country, working with a nonprofit, our Collective Becoming, um, to help fund that. They are creating a position for us, for me, that I will work with them and be able to be a digital nomad.
It's good to meet you,
Nice to
David.
meet you as well, Celeste. Thank you so much for hosting this. And Jennifer, as always, great to see you.
You as well.
Yeah. So I,
Yeah.
I didn't mean to
Um,
pop in and interrupt. You were in the midst of telling your story, Jennifer. So I'm sorry that I
Oh, I
interrupted.
just was doing a brief introduction while Celeste is getting us going on YouTube.
Okay.
yeah. So the very first thing I need us to do real quick, so that I can fix up the YouTube thumbnail is if we can all do a nice little smile for the camera. And I will take a quick screenshot.
Sounds good.
Oh, it came out great.
Good.
Perfect.
I never know where to look on those things. So,
I
You
never do
know,
either.
everybody did great. Everybody's looking straight at the camera. We're good. Everybody's good. Now I just need to go in and remember how to do this. So, Jennifer, you were talking about what you're going to be doing. So, if you want to do that um, a little bit more while I fix this up, that'd be amazing. Um, and maybe David, if you can help out asking questions and everything.
sure.
What am I calling this thing? I'm going to call it Protect Trans Kid.
Amen.
Perfect.
Um, Fundraiser for Harris Dault, family leaving the United States. Okay. So Jennifer, you were. Can you tell a little bit more? I was curious. One thing in particular. Um, I was curious more about learning about the nonprofit that this is kind of going through. Do you want to talk about a little bit more about them and kind of what you'll be doing associated with them?
Sure. So our Collective Becoming is run by Roberto Che Espinoza. Um, and the whole idea is creating community. Um, he is a trans man trying to help queer folks, both in New York and now across the world, um, who don't always have great traditional ways of making income. I mean, so some of the folks who are part of the nonprofit are artists who, because of being queer, don't have the same level of opportunity um, as their non-queer counterparts, and so creating a way to fund these things that our world needs: uh, beauty, art, um, a chance to be oneself. Um, so yeah, so we'll be figuring out how to establish community where we are, to help make it a safe place for others as well, so that we can be a haven if others need to take the same journey that we are. Um, or those who are already there needing to build deeper connections, that sort of thing.
Jennifer, was
Yeah.
it by happenstance that you and Dr. Espinoza ended up in basically the same location, or had you known about each other before this, or sort of how did that relationship develop?
So we sort of knew each other through Mennonite circles, but we ended we both happened to move here roughly the same time, landed on a panel at the seminary here together, and said, "Wait, you moved here too?" Like, did they bring you in? What is this? And yeah, we've been getting together about once a month when he travels up to Rochester for some regular appointments. And we have lunch together. And yeah, it was one of those where he said, I have a nonprofit. We can make this work. Um, and yeah, I've been trying to figure out what that looks like ever since.
And I imagine that there's a great unknown factor here. Like sometimes living in an open-ended way is exciting and surprising, but in this particular case, I think the added precarity on top of precarity on top of precarity has maybe been a little crazy making. And so I can only imagine the relief that you felt when Dr. Espinoza had that as a pathway for you and for your family.
Yeah, it was the first time that I sort of thought, I mean, I don't know how we're gonna make this work, but this is an actual road when I haven't seen one. Um, yeah, but you're right about all of the transition. I've come to hate liminal space as much as it is necessary in all of life and can bring all manner of good things. It is not my favorite at the moment.
Well, liminal space, to navigate that when you have a support system and you have definite paths in place, but without going too much into detail, a lot of this journey for you and for your family has been uh, the sort of loss of some of those support systems and some of those expected avenues of care. And that's been very heartbreaking. As a person who loves you dearly, it's been heartbreaking to be in the midst of that and to be observing that.
Yeah, yeah, you're
Yeah.
right. Um, we moved where we did for protective laws, and then we chose where looked at where do we know someone. Um, Chicago was the other place we looked at. But as it turns out, it was more expensive than where we are.
Oh, I'm well
So New York
aware.
won out. Yeah, New York won out. We do have some great support here, but we've had to, other than chosen family that we had here, we've had to build it. Um, and I think have just reached the point where it really feels like, oh, we love this place, we love these people, and now we're looking at doing it all over again. Except this time we won't know anyone and we don't speak the language, so more excitement to come.
Yeah. Well, what you're gesturing towards there, and Celeste, I don't know if you want to speak to this as well, but for so many people who are being sort of thrust into this situation, understanding that they can't necessarily count on their biological family and discovering that they do have a family of choice, that can be a mixed blessing. It can be wonderful to know that there are those that care about you as if they were of blood relation to you, but at the same time, um, knowing that you can't necessarily depend upon those that have been close and intimate with you in your own family, that can be a sad thing too. But I want to focus on the positive here, and I wonder if either or both of you want to talk a little bit more about what it is to discover a family of choice, or what it is to discover that you have uh to use the language of the South, a hush harbor, or a maroon space in the midst of threat.
Yeah. Jen, do you want to take that one, or I can jump? I could
If
share
you
one.
want to go ahead, and then I'm
Yeah,
glad to
I've
add
been
to it as well.
updating our little YouTube stuff. By the way, I see we've got a few people watching, and welcome to all of them. It's great to have you here. Jessica from Missouri, I see you in the chat, and great to have you here. And feel free, anybody watching can, throw a question in the chat anytime. And we'll try and get there. I will keep an eye on it. And that'll be fun. So, yeah. So, oh, and look, I can even see the chat in Riverside, so that's helpful. I don't know if the two of you can see that too, but I can. So,
Oh, maybe.
um,
I do
yeah,
see a chat thing.
learning how to do this, learning. We are professionals. Um, I know David actually kind of is. So, actually is,
Not
but
with Riverside though. This is the wild
okay.
frontier for me. So, viewers that have just come on, you have missed me already. Sort of hitting the wrong button and bouncing myself out of the out of the call, having to come back in. So that's the way these things go.
Amazing. But David, your question was kind of like, what's it like, when you have to move from home, which Jennifer and her family have already done once. They have moved from, am I allowed to say from to?
Sure.
You've
Yeah.
been pretty public about that. Jenna, hi, great to see you. Excited to have you on later today. Also, so for those of you watching, Jenna in the chat is going to be our last guest of the day, unless something changes, but excited to talk with her tonight. So, yeah, we're talking about kind of found families, chosen families, and yeah, Jen's already had to move once. I had to move. Hey Sam, good to see you. David, yes, David is in the chat and on the thing. So, sorry, I got faked out there a little bit. But um, sorry. But yeah, Skip Sandwich is here. So, um, yeah, so found family, made family. It's so important. I've had to move away from, places where I knew everybody and kind of reestablish, and you find those people, right, that you can count on. And it just makes all the difference, right? It's just um it can be a very lonely thing. And it can kind of feel like, okay, now I'm in a place where everybody knows each other, but nobody knows me. And then, I think for me, it was a huge deal when I made that first friend, that it was like, okay, here's somebody that I actually know. So, anyway, there we go. So, Jen, how about you?
Yeah. So the family that we moved to be close to here, we actually knew from the Kansas City area. So they had not always been in New York. A ministry mentor to me, um, and I realized she was the person that I called whenever I was having, sort of my own personal crisis. And so just asked would you like a couple of grandkids? And she immediately responded, yes, tell me more. So they have become Oma and Opa. And, for the year or two before we left Missouri, we'd have regular Zoom calls. Um, and then, yeah, so we'll be there over there for Halloween. Um, but yeah, the folks who are just there, no matter what, they're upset that we're having to do this again.
So yeah, I want to talk about that a little bit, around. So for those of you on the stream right now, there is link in the description on the YouTube, around. You can get to a link. It's to Jennifer's blog post, but it includes the link to be able to give. Make sure that when you give, you put Jennifer's name in the description. Monthly gifts are awesome, but all gifts are great. So I should say, maybe all gifts are awesome and monthly gifts are awesomer. But everything, of course, is helpful. So, but yeah, so um, just wanted to talk about, so as you move, what's the you've already moved from Missouri to New York, right? To try and protect your kid. And now you're making the decision of like, yeah, even New York isn't safe, isn't a place that works for your family and your trans daughter in particular. And so, if you can talk a little bit about, why is that? As people look, I encounter a lot of people who are like, "What? The government's doing stuff to trans people?" And so, which I understand, there's a whole lot going on, and there are so many things on any given day. But if you want to talk a little bit about that,
Of course.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, and I think there's good reason that people don't know, because it's not really talked about very much unless you are in the right circles.
yeah,
It affects, you know, a minority of the population, and for whatever reason, that seems to be enough not to cover it in the general press. And so it's following transgender journalists that I keep up with news.
right,
Um, but I mean, the current administration has made it a priority to attack the trans community.
right,
Almost immediately, the attack was on passports, where you can't get a passport with the correct gender marker. Um, and there's those who are non-binary or otherwise have chosen an X gender marker. Those who already have one, it's causing problems. For coming and going.
right,
Uh, yeah. Um,
yeah,
and then we've already seen bans on certain types of healthcare for military members. Not to mention the attacks on military members who are trans or have trans family members to begin with. One of the big things for us was in April for Child Abuse Prevention Month. The president issued an executive order both naming it as Child Abuse Prevention Month, but stating the only child abuse that was mentioned in the entire document was trans kids being supported. Um, it was mostly targeting doctors, the medical community, but it became very clear that um, supporting your child was going to be labeled abusive, which is terrifying
right,
because once that happens, they can take my kids from me. They can, keep her from growing up uh, as who she is. And we see the continual attacks on gender affirming care. Medical institutions are being threatened with funding. So places in states where gender affirming care for minors is legal, there's the suggestion that federal funding will be cut if they do not stop providing care.
right,
Um, we see the same thing in higher education, and I think we'll see that continuing to get in, to the regular public school system. Well, we already are. So that, the idea that you will not receive funding if you allow students to use the proper bathroom or to be able to play sports. Um, and just the rhetoric, even if none of this ever came to be, and we already have seen plenty of places shut down, cave, and change the way that they're treating people. But even if none of that happened, the rhetoric itself um, causes such harm, both to mental health for the trans community, and it riles up people who might not know that
yeah,
they know any trans people, but who have suddenly been told that they're scary, they're
right,
doing bad things, and we need to stop this.
right,
None of which is true.
right, right. Yeah, I think, hey, what you just said about, for those who don't know that they know a trans person, right? Everybody knows a trans person,
You do, yep.
right? Oh, everybody knows it might be your barista, it might be, whoever, but like, what's the line from Andor? I have friends everywhere. It's trans people are, depending on how you count, at minimum something like 0.6% of people in this country, which is not a lot, but it's like 1 in 150. So unless you don't know 150 people, um, you probably know a trans person. Or, if you're in a very conservative space and you're sure nobody has transitioned, which, don't be so sure. But you probably know somebody who really wishes that they could, and it really hurts that they can't. Everybody who ever knew me in my entire life knew a trans person. They just didn't know it.
Mhm.
Um, so that's such an important thing. The other thing I wanted to talk about, mention from what you said, that like child abuse prevention thing was just horrible. Like, it's just beyond the pale to be like, let's talk about child abuse and what's really child abuse. The only thing we're going to talk about that's actually child abuse is supporting trans kids, right? Um,
Following the advice of every major medical and psychological association.
which we will say a million times today,
Yep.
I'm sure. Gender affirming care is supported by every major medical organization in the country. Contrast with conversion therapy, which the Supreme Court is going to say is legal or something, which is condemned by every relevant major medical organization in the country. So, but yeah, but I wanted to, um, on that, I noticed a couple weeks ago, I was doing research, um, for something I was writing about, a certain evangelical author, Preston Sprinkle. And I was doing some research for one of my pieces about him and was looking into suicide rates and things like that, and came across the CDC does a every other. Hey, Billy. Um, can't wait to see you later. For those of you who can tune in later, you'll get to see Billy, you'll get to see Jenna. It's going to be amazing. Um, but yeah, like they did a thing that basically was like this every other year survey of like things that impact kids negatively. So you've got the usual, bullying or being unhoused or, just situation at home where you've got domestic violence at home or whatever, right? Like you have these sorts of things, child abuse, actual child abuse, and things like that. And the most recent one in 2023 included a pretty deep dive on what trans and gender nonconforming kids in particular experience. And of course, it showed exactly what every other study has ever showed, which is, um, they have higher rates of, everything bad and lower rates of everything good. And it was just so sad. And what made me just absolutely so angry was seeing that this entire report that the Trump administration had tried to remove it, and it was there, but it was only there with a message at the top saying, this is only here because of a court order, because we tried to take the whole report down because it mentions gender ideology, and that's wrong. And so we think this entire report is garbage. It's like a 250-page report. Like 3 of the pages are about trans kids
Yeah.
and everything else is about suicide prevention, bullying prevention, reducing depression, drug use, decreasing risky sexual behaviors and things like that, and all of these different things this whole report is about. And they're like, yeah, we hate trans people so much we'd rather throw away all of that, right? And it's like, even if you don't care about trans kids, which of course we do, and they should, it's like you're throwing away all of the rest just because you're that
It's
angry.
okay for everyone else to be bullied as long as we keep
Yeah,
you from knowing that
yeah.
trans kids exist.
If we can make sure that no amount of harm to other kids is too much to make sure that we are not supporting trans kids.
Well, having grown up in the South, I mean, this is a known playbook. When the courts demanded that the swimming pools, the public pools, be integrated, they chose instead to close the pools. So
Right.
I was thinking of that exact same thing.
take away the good from everyone to make sure that the good is not shared with the wrong population. So yeah.
Yeah. skip sandwich. Peak, cutting off your nose to spite your face.
Yep.
Absolutely. Um, I think I can even make that show up. I don't know if I can. There we
There
go.
we are. Yay.
Hey, I can do streaming. I'm really proud of myself for that. So, um,
Well,
but
one aspect of this, and I think it goes unsaid, but it's important. Most of us as citizens, or I will say most of us white male folks as citizens, have the experience of government leaving us alone and have the experience of not being scrutinized, in our life, in our daily business and anything like that. And that becomes the kind of status quo. Um, and so when when we're talking about these sorts of laws and these sorts of attentions that the Trump administration is doing, and not just the Trump administration, we're talking about two things. We're talking about moments when the government chooses to see the wrong aspects, or chooses to ignore the essential aspects. So if you're on November 1st, a whole bunch of people are going to lose SNAP benefits. Their hunger will no longer be seen by the government as something that needs response. Whereas this small minority of suffering and vulnerable people are being sort of over scrutinized as this is the problem that needs to be solved. And again, I'm scare quoting all of this. And so the violence of the government is both it's there constantly, but when it is turned in your direction so that you're always under scrutiny, and Jennifer, you mentioned this a few minutes ago, it can cause a tremendous amount of stress to feel like you're always being watched. You've always got
Yeah.
someone over your shoulder, and that's
Yeah.
an experience that, again, as a sort of cis presenting, het presenting white male of roughly middle class income, I have been able to be kind of not part of that scrutiny for a lot of my life. But I've sort of been a victim of enough of it that I know that when I encounter it, I don't like it. And so recognizing that there are people in my family that are under that kind of constant scrutiny, and then extending from there that circle of empathy, realizing that there's an entire population that is under this scrutiny, and as a result of that scrutiny are facing things like increased stress. But increased stress can lead to economic hardship, it can lead to housing hardship, it can lead to premature death, it can lead to sickness and illness and to chronic conditions. Like, all of that is just, none of that is anything that I want to see promulgated in the world. And so it, it's become very important, even though it doesn't directly affect me, it's become very important to be as visible as I can and as loud as I can as an ally, because I want to draw some of that scrutiny onto me. And I have support and shielding to protect hopefully some vulnerable others that maybe don't have quite the same shielding and support. I don't know, I'm kind of rambling, sorry, but hopefully some of that makes
no,
sense.
that it's so good. David, can I talk about what you posted on Facebook the other day about fascism?
Sure.
Okay, I don't know if you made that one public.
Yeah, my life is an open book, you can do it.
Okay. You've posted a lot, so I'm having a hard time finding the actual post, but I loved what you put up there, and it is the energy that we need, and it is what we want to be talking about today, because today is about, you know, none of us is the one that is most impacted here as we talk today, right?
Yeah.
This is about a kid. And I'm sure Billy later today is going to talk about, okay, the conservatives call this a culture war and whatever. And just what kind of people start a war by going after the enemy's kids, right? It's just absolutely beyond the pale. And we do see, the other study we saw was, that they were able to see that even just having anti-trans laws in a state dramatically impacts the mental health of the trans kids in that state, right? Even if they manage to avoid the impact of it, just seeing the state tell you you're wrong, right? Tell you you are unacceptable to the state. Famously, the Oklahoma governor, somebody, I think, high up, after Next Benedict, was bullied into suicide, is what appears to have happened there. Um, and so was killed, is the right way to talk about that. After that, and somebody was like, "Hey, don't you worry about this." And the governor was like, "Oh, we don't want that filth in our state." And it's like, for any trans kid in that state, how are they not supposed to hear that and experience impact from those kinds of words, right? And we never want it to go that far. We never want it to, we want people to be safe, but none of us is the one that's being that impacted um, by this. We're talking about a kid here, which means, to some extent, all of us, but, David, you in particular here, it is about allyship. It is about people who are choosing that, even though whatever laws and policies and whatever don't affect them personally, to say, I'm going to stand in front and I'm going to say this, I forget who it was. I think David Tennant at one point wore a shirt that was like, you will have to go through me. Right. And I love it. Right. It's the energy we need. Right. And I see you, David, doing that all the time, posting, solidarity, solidarity. And it means so much. It really does, because then I see you go and do it. Right. It's not just a little heart or whatever, but I see you go and do it. But your post on Facebook the other day about, like, hey, if you're mad at people who are saying they are anti-fascist, you're like, yeah, me, come get me first, right? And I just got to say, I respect that so much, and was so thankful for voices like yours doing that, because you don't have to do that to survive, right?
Yeah.
You don't have, right? Like, you have that privilege that it doesn't affect you as much, right?
I'm very thankful for those kind words, Celeste, but may I yes and something that you and Jennifer sort of raised a moment ago?
Sure.
And that is, we're not just talking about violence from the state. I also want to specifically call out violence from the church, and in particular, my
Yes.
church. I'm a Roman Catholic, and some of the language before Pope Francis passed away, even though I'm a big fan of Pope Francis, comparing transgender ideology, again, scare quoting that, to the existence of nuclear weapons. So the existence of a trans kid is sort of like the existence of a nuclear bomb. Like, what does that say to someone who is sitting in the pews, who is experiencing an identity that is different from their birth identity, and suddenly they're being told that they have the kind of physical and violent impact of a nuclear weapon, like
Right.
that. And so we need to be speaking not only to our elected leaders when they're available to us, but
Yeah.
also we need to be finding ways to speak to an increasingly bigoted and caustic church that feels comfortable having these kinds of messages sort of roll casually from its hierarchy. And I know I'm not speaking for all Catholics when I say that,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of Catholics that are on the front lines of this. I hope that I can be among them. But also, I recognize I'm not speaking for all churches. I mean, there are many churches that have been very visible allies, but they need to be more, and they need to be more vocal.
Absolutely.
Yes, yes, they do. And you mentioned the impact on, trans kids in the pews, but also I think about what that says to others in the pews, because how do you respond to the threat of a nuclear weapon? And so hearing, well, that kid over there that I don't know, you know, we have to stop them.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
And
there have been so many stories highlighted, the book Trans Kids by Tay Meadow, tells the story of a 6-year-old who, her mom had to take her and flee the state. To, like, they don't share where they are. They don't have education records or medical records, because that might alert someone to where they are. Where neighbors killed their dog, killed that family's dog, and said, we want to, threatening the kid in that same way. And I think, how do people how do any people get to the point where they're willing to do that sort of thing to a child, to anyone? But especially, a 6-year-old. How do you how are you so scared of a 6-year-old?
Well, and here, Billy's work from later on Contagion, I think, is going to be a very important part of this conversation, and the
Absolutely.
way that in order to belong to certain groups, you have to malign other groups as just a marker of being, and and it's very, very hard to maintain a democracy under those conditions.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's huge, and I know I started and I was hoping to get my blog post out today. It didn't happen, but um I'll get it out in the next couple days and I'll link this in it. But talking about those stress responses, right, that we all feel, and talking about the collective version of those, right, when it happens, or the version of those that is a response to oppression and marginalization and things like that. And obviously, if we're going fight, flight, freeze, fawn, moving out of the country, right, is a very flight response. And it's good to recognize, like, that's a perfectly reasonable thing to do, right? And it's a perfectly valid thing to do. I know even in the trans community, there's a lot of, do we stay? Do we go? A lot of us, it's moot because it's like, well, where would I even go? How would I even go? I don't have the whatever, which is again why we're here today, is to try and make sure that Jen and her family do have the means to do that. But to anybody trying to protect a trans kid, 100%, I'm like, yeah, if you can, and you want to get out, we need to support that. But um, we are in that state. Jen, I did want to um, ask, just because I want to keep your daughter centered in this. Um, and I just wanted to capture, like, what are we trying to do here? We've talked about a lot about the impacts of oppression and things like that, but I also want to talk about what the positive impact of freedom to be herself, and access to the support that she needs, and things like that. And so I was wondering if you wouldn't mind, while I work on my makeup a little bit, if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about, what does a trans kid thriving look like, right? What does that, we talk about trans joy a lot. I love talking about trans joy, but what does trans joy and what does a trans kid thriving look like? What do you both, if there's things you can share about what you see when that does happen, or also just what do you imagine? What are you hoping for in this?
Absolutely. So I'm hoping that she won't have to think about whether or not, you know, when she goes to the doctor, if who she is going to be a problem.
Right.
That's we vet every single provider of any sort that we work with. Being in a place where that's not needed would be magical. But I mean, the very basics, we want her to have access to the healthcare that she wants and requires. And that was one of the things we went to her, and she's an elementary student. So let's be clear, this is not someone who should have to be thinking about these things. But to talk about, to gauge from her, we didn't want to make the decision that, oh, we're going to move again, without her involvement. Um, so, I had to sit her down and have a conversation, um, where she told me that, she's willing to learn how to say, I want gender affirming care in another language. And that, was like, okay, here we are. Like, that's, we had hoped that we'd just be able to cross the border, into Canada, remaining living here and going back and forth for care, even though that is, a 3+ hour drive in one direction. Um, and then, the targeting of passports made that seem not as probable as we had hoped. But yeah, just having to constantly think about what your government is saying about you, um, it shrinks the box. Um,
Yeah.
and all kids deserve, one, not to be in a box, but to have, so much freedom. the opportunity to be a kid, to get to explore and play with friends and not have to worry about gender, um, is what I long for.
Jennifer, can I ask a follow on that?
Absolutely.
So, one of the things that really touched me so much when you first chose to disclose this to people outside of your immediate family, but to family members like me, um, the language that you used was that you're going to be following her lead, your daughter's
Yeah.
lead, and that she is getting to speak about who she is and what her experience is, and you're going to take that seriously and listen to that. That was a profound kind of paradigm shift for me in a lot of ways,
Mm.
receiving that and realizing, oh, as a parent, I don't have to dictate the story to my child, but rather I can follow the lead of my child as they make their own story. I wonder if you'd be willing to say a little bit more about that and what that experience has been
Sure.
like.
Yeah. I mean, like you, I also grew up in the South, as a Southern Baptist, um, where who you are, there are these prescribed roles for, okay, you're a girl. This is what that looks like. Um, and I pushed against that. Like some of those things did not work for me. Um, but it was hard at first to want her to fit into a box. She got to choose the box, but then but learning, oh, no, no, it doesn't matter what someone if someone else thinks you are girl enough, or for, someone of a different gender or boy enough or non-binary enough. Like you don't have to fit someone else's narrative. So we continually listen to her about, she's the expert on who she is. There are things that I might be able to see in her, but I can be wrong. So, we ask a lot of questions. There have been times that she, especially early on, would get really frustrated as we were talking about like names or, initially, asking every day about pronouns. She's like, "Why do you keep asking me this?" It's like, okay, so I can trust that you'll just tell me if something changes. Yeah. Okay. Great. Um, yeah, it's been a lot of unlearning and relearning, in ways that are really beautiful.
May I ask one other question?
Absolutely.
I can imagine as a parent myself that when you are sort of having a child move from toddler into, preschool into elementary, you start to form kind of future trajectories. And you've had to let go of a lot of those future trajectories and allow them to be kind of unmapped and remapped. And you just mentioned that there was some joy in the process. Has there also been grieving in that process, and how have you engaged that grieving?
Um, so I think the grieving has been mostly in letting go of geographical
Yeah.
places and the relationships we've had. Um, so we bought a house in Missouri, and I remember we'd be in the backyard, and the previous owners had like filled garden boxes with rocks. And as we were like digging out rocks and giving them away, on buy nothing groups, I remember my kid telling people who'd come to pick them up, "My mama has big plans." And that was like, I want to plant a garden. Um, but thinking along those lines, and then when we had to leave, it was, oh, okay. I mean, I think for a lot of people when they move, there's a desire. There's, I have this job that I'm looking forward to, or we are wanting to go to this place because family's there, or because I've always dreamed of being there. And our moves have been not by our
Yeah.
choice. I mean, we've had agency in determining that this would be the best thing, but it's not been, an exciting thing to go to. We've had to find those exciting things to look forward to. But our community in Missouri was great. it was just the government that was a problem. But our local being in the city, you know, our family was loved and supported by everyone we encountered. Our church, our community, the schools, were great. And so, the threat was real. And also it kind of like here in New York, we feel it. And also the daily effects we don't see just yet, on a local level. And so there's a lot of grief in having to uproot. We bought a house when we did because we wanted our kids to have the experience of being in school, with the same kids. And well, that clearly that's not going to happen. And yeah, but there's grief in that, and realizing that that story is different,
Some
and that there are traumas that we wish that they didn't have to carry.
And something that I have been very pleased to observe on social media, and I recognize that many who are going to be watching this conversation are not necessarily able to see all of the social media that I have access to. But one of the things that I want to lift up and say is that you and your family are very intentional about centering joy and finding
Mm.
ways to be together as a family and to have those moments of gratefulness. And even from a distance, it's very clear what you are doing and why you are doing it. And I wonder if you would also speak a little bit about the intentionality of centering joy and the necessity of centering joy in this process.
Yeah. I mean, part of that is we love each other. And so joy is a natural thing that pours from that. But also, we believe that joy is important. It is an act of resistance. I don't know that that's why we want our kids to get to experience joy. But I think certainly as parents, having those opportunities to experience joy, to put more joy into the world, is a refusal to buy into the narrative that there is something wrong with us, or that we are problematic. It helps shape the world to what we want it to be, rather than the narrative that is being put forth by others.
Well, and I think in the face of the threats and the violence, being able to tap into that and to have memories of that, but also to be willing to constantly revisit that joy. Yeah, you said it very well. It's an act of resistance, but also it's not centering the resistance. It's
Yeah.
resistive by centering what matters, if that makes sense.
Mhm. It is. I mean, and it also is resilience. You need joy in order to continue anything, but certainly to continue, to create that better world.
And when you use this better world language, I recognize, or at least I'm hearing echoes of some of the work that Roberto Shea Espinoza is
Mm.
talking about as well. And so, how how are you not only buoyed by the joy that you generate from within your family, but also from these sort of people that have come alongside of you who have visions for a better world? How are you tapping into some of what they see that maybe you're only glimpsing at this moment?
Yeah. I mean, so I think joy multiplies, and that's part of its strength, its importance. I don't know what word to use there, but I think the more people who are talking about ways that we can create something better, um, that energy, that imagination expands as well. I think in isolation, it can be hard to dream. And so having those conversations and getting to dream together, um, can really create something beautiful.
And I'm about to ask a question that you are welcome to not answer, but sort of how has this journey affected your sense of your Jennifer's faith? your
Mm,
relationship to God. I can think of several psalms that might describe the situation that you have found yourself in with your family. And so I wonder, are you, in the midst of the travail, saying, "Thy rod and thy staff protect me," or are you shouting at the heavens? Like, where have you been with that?
yes. Yes. It's the yeah, I mean, starting in Missouri, I think traveling to the Capitol to testify before committees about the awful transphobic bills that they were putting forth, and seeing who showed up.
And who left the room when you stood up to testify as
Yeah,
well?
and who left the room. But so often, those who left the room would start by talking about how these bills were part of their faith. Their Christian faith led them to do these things. Um, and then there were countless rabbis who would stand in opposition. One who will be on here later, my dear friend Daniel Bogard. Um, But the Jewish community showed up. And, the Jewish community in Missouri is not particularly large, but they were there. Um, and then there would be, a handful of pastors. There are a whole lot of pastors in Missouri. There are a whole lot of great pastors in Missouri who just didn't find it important enough to go. And I get there's a lot competing. Often we would hear about these hearings, the day before. They would give us as little notice as possible to try to keep folks from going. But the silence from the church uh, was so loud. And I continue to see that. I am part of a couple of excellent churches who are trying to be loud. But it was one of those, my faith in God didn't change, but also it was hard to have faith in the church.
Well, as a person who makes my living in part as a professional public Christian,
Yep.
I want to name my sorrow at that, and also my apology that that was your experience. Um, I would like to think that wouldn't be the case, and unfortunately, we all know how much it is the case. Damn it.
Indeed.
That's all. I loved listening in to the conversation as I did my makeup quickly. Jennifer, there were so many things in there, but just building on that last one, yeah, like um, it breaks my heart seeing pastors not show up the way they need to. I was honored. We're going to have um, uh, Reverend Doctors Jen Strickland and Jacob Buchholz. I don't actually know if I'm saying his last name right. I've known him for like 4 years now, and I'm going to have to ask him later how he says his name. This is going to be real embarrassing for me. I was so impressed. A couple weeks ago, he and a number of local clergy went to a local school board meeting, and it's one of these school boards that's been completely overtaken by Christian nationalists and whatever. And they wrote and went and submitted and read a statement in support of LGBTQ youth, in particular trans youth. And they were in all their clergy apparel and everything, and it was beautiful to see and tragic at how rare it is, right? And how hard it was for yeah, just the fact that it is rare, the fact that we don't see pastors standing the way that they need to. Um, it's not biblical, right? When I read the
Yeah.
Bible, I see, open your mouth for the oppressed, right? You stand up for those who can't stand up for themselves. That's what we mean when we say do justice, right? Not just like hope for justice, but like go build justice in the world, be part of building justice in the world. And so I wish we saw more pastors doing that. Um, Jennifer, I love seeing all of your work in particular on that. And it is heartbreaking when we see that contrast of, we see people at the small scale doing the work like you, and then, like David said, we see, um, the Pope, who, as far as I know, somebody recently said, and this might actually be true, might be the single person who leads the most people in the entire world. And seeing him say something really damaging. Hey, everybody. Thanks for listening or watching. Quick note, this interview was part of a live stream fundraiser to help Jennifer Harris Dault and her family move out of the country to protect their transgender daughter from anti-trans policies in the United States. You'll find a link in the description that tells you how you can donate. Any help, one-time gifts, monthly gifts, or even just sharing this is very much appreciated. I also want to say thank you to each and every guest who joined and everyone who watches or listens. It means so much to me, and I'm sure to the Harris Dault family.